Payday feels amazing. 1 week later, it's gone. Where did all that money go? If your salary doubled tomorrow, would your life actually change? Or would you spend more? This is Elias, and one warning changed everything for him. Before we continue, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because we share stories about discipline and the choices that rebuild a life. In a quiet little town lived a 24-year-old named Elias, and he wasn't lazy, waking early every morning to reach work on time. He walked 40 minutes just to arrive. He spent the whole day stocking shelves, hauling heavy boxes, and cleaning aisles, standing on his feet from sunrise to sunset. By evening, his legs ached badly. His shirt stayed soaked with sweat, yet after all that effort, his paycheck barely covered survival. He joked they worked only for food. Everyone laughed, but deep down they all knew it was true. Elias rented a single cramped room where the roof leaked hard and his mattress sat directly on the floor. Some nights he skipped dinner completely. He needed enough saved just for bus fare, because Elias had one habit that made everything worse. The day his salary landed, he felt rich. His friends called immediately, saying he only lived once, and without thinking twice, he always went along. They hit the clubs and spent freely. They bought drinks they couldn't afford and took photos, pretending everything in their lives was perfect. Sometimes he bought shoes to hide the struggle. For a few hours he felt important, like everyone else around him. But a week later, reality always returned quietly. His wallet was empty, his account was empty, and his kitchen was empty too, again. He quietly counted the days until payday. One afternoon, walking home, he passed a small diner where roasted chicken filled the air and his stomach growled. He checked his pocket and found only bread money. He watched strangers enjoy meals he couldn't afford, then quietly walked away. That night he lay awake, staring upward. "Why does my life never change?" he whispered to himself. The next month, the same cycle repeated. One Saturday evening, Elias heard shouting near a rental house. A frightened tenant stood beside two small bags. Those bags held everything his family owned, while his wife cried and their daughter clutched her dress. "I've given you enough time," the landlord shouted. "You work every day, yet you never have rent, so leave." Then he said something that stopped Elias cold. "You work, but you never plan." Elias couldn't move. Those words felt aimed straight at him, not at the stranger. He looked down at his own worn shoes, then toward the tiny room he rented nearby. One terrifying thought crossed his mind. What if one day that's me? For the first time, he understood it wasn't only his salary keeping him poor. It was what he did after receiving it. The next morning, Elias walked into the town library for the very first time in his life. Rows of books surrounded him everywhere. One title caught his eye, How to Build Wealth on a Small Income. He borrowed it and started reading immediately. "A small salary isn't your biggest problem," it said. "A lack of a plan is." He stared at that sentence for minutes. When payday came again, he skipped the club, and his friends called, confused. He just laughed and said no. "I don't want my future disappearing in one weekend," he told them calmly. That night he cooked his own dinner. He wrote every expense in a small notebook: rent, food, transport, and savings. For the first time, it had purpose. If you're still watching, ask yourself one honest question. Which one of Elias's habits is quietly keeping you from the life you actually want? Tell us in the comments which spending habit you're finally ready to break, because saying it out loud is often the first step toward changing it. And if this story is hitting home, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because one lesson like this can genuinely change a lifetime. Weeks turned into months, and Elias started waking before sunrise every single day. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to change. He read pages before work, still stocked shelves, still carried boxes, still earned the same salary. But something inside him had shifted completely. While coworkers complained, he wrote down business ideas and savings goals instead. Some mocked him, asking if it would help. "Maybe not," he said, "but it might stop me from staying poor." Every payday followed the same new routine: rent first, only what he needed, then savings. At first, the savings looked meaningless. Never laugh at small savings, the book had warned. One day they grow. A year passed, and Elias reached month's end with money still left for the first time. He wasn't wealthy yet, but controlled. His friends still lived the same way, still celebrating, still borrowing before the next payday. When they called him boring, he smiled. "I still have fun," he said. "I just sleep peacefully now." Years passed, and Elias kept learning, reading about discipline, finance, and small business. He started a tiny side venture slowly. It grew painfully slow, but he never quit, remembering exactly how waiting felt. His savings became a deposit on land. Years later, that land became his very first rental property in town. He never rushed to impress anyone else. One afternoon, he walked past that same street where he'd watched a family lose everything. He stopped and smiled quietly to himself. Not because he was famous, but because he finally felt safe and secure. A few years later, he finished his house. Standing alone in the empty living room, he remembered the hungry nights and hidden tears. He simply whispered, "Thank you." Soon after, his mother visited, walking slowly and touching every wall in the house. Then, without warning, she began crying. "I used to fear your salary would never be enough," she whispered, "and I was wrong." He hugged her tightly, needing no words at all. Years later, people no longer knew him as the stock boy from the supermarket. They knew him as an honest landlord. One who never shouted at real hardship, remembering that frightened family long ago. A small paycheck isn't why people stay broke. The real problem is usually just a missing plan. His salary didn't change. His habits did. You don't need millions to start changing your future. Only faithfulness with what you have. A paycheck feeds you for a month, but wisdom provides for a lifetime. So when your next paycheck lands, what happens? Will it vanish again, or begin something new? If this story touched you, like it, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs hope, because your next paycheck could be the beginning you've been waiting for.